The National Desk, America's News, now.
From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm TD Gatton, and on this weekend edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and look ahead at what to expect. Starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. A Utah man was killed during an FBI raid on his home. Agents were trying to arrest him for what they called credible threats to assassinate President Joe Biden. In Hawaii, the state is recovering from historic and deadly wildfires charring parts of Maui. And 2 states in the Northeast are now taking drastic measures to address an influx of migrants. How Massachusetts and New York are responding. Plus, crime in the nation's capital increasing at a near record pace. The controversial new proposal from a city councilman to address the situation. Starting with our top story, FBI agents shot and killed a Utah man who reportedly threatened to kill President Joe Biden during a visit to Salt Lake City. They'd been investigating him for months before Wednesday's raid. The National Desk's Amanda Gilbert explains how it all unfolded in the quiet neighborhood.
This damaged window is some of the aftermath from when the FBI showed up trying to arrest Craig Robertson around 6 in the morning.
Kind of identifying themselves as FBI, yelling at Craig to come out of his house.
Doors down, John Michael Osola heard things escalate.
These loud kind of bangs of just kind of waking him up, I think, waking up the whole block too.
Eventually, the SWAT team and FBI forcefully entered the house.
And he kept shouting something too, like, I haven't broken any federal laws, and so he was clearly there.
Gunshots could be heard.
We just kind of saw him pull Craig out and put him on the kind of edge of his driveway there and tend to him for a couple minutes, but it was pretty clear he was gone.
An FBI spokesperson confirms agents shot and killed the suspect. They were there because Robertson had been making social media threats, which can be seen online and in court documents, to kill or inflict bodily harm on President Joe Biden during his visit to Utah. One reads, quote, I hear Biden is coming to Utah, digging out my old ghillie suit and cleaning the dust off the M24 sniper rifle. Robertson has also made remarks online since March about FBI agents, the New York County District Attorney, and other officials.
I don't know, you hear about crazy things happening other places, but it's weird to be in Provo.
Neighbor Morgan Jonda and his wife were shocked learning about this on their morning stroll.
It's just a quiet neighborhood. Nothing ever happens.
All this happening just hours before President Biden was set to land in Salt Lake, about 40 miles away.
And that was Amanda Gilbert reporting. So far, the FBI has not released any other details about what happened in the moments before the shooting. Right now, Hawaii is in recovery mode after unprecedented and deadly wildfires. Maui County officials say at least 50 people were killed, but warn that number could grow. The state had to activate its National Guard to assist in the emergency response. Scenes on your screen right here. Major airlines added flights off of the island to get tourists out of the area and give emergency shelters some relief. It's not clear how the fire started, but they were fueled by strong winds from both directions. The state's emergency management agency calling it a perfect storm.
With the high winds that were being generated by the weather system to our north and Hurricane Dora to our south, we normally will see a trade wind pattern this time of year. That's usually 10 to 20 miles an hour. What we were experiencing was 30 to 40 mile an hour winds with 80 mile an hour gusts.
The fire destroyed more than 250 buildings, including some of Maui's most historic buildings. President Biden has promised all federal assets to help the state rebuild. Several developments out of Atlanta. The Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis will likely present the findings of her election interference investigation involving former President Donald Trump to a grand jury in the coming days. Multiple media outlets reporting that she will see conspiracy and racketeering charges against Trump. The criminal investigation focuses on his alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 election. A grand jury could decide to issue an indictment, which would be the 4th for Trump. Trump has already taken out new ads in the Atlanta area criticizing Willis. Turning to his most recent indictment related to January 6th, during a hearing Friday morning, a U.S. district judge said she would accept a protective order that would limit the former president from sharing any information about the case that is considered sensitive. That includes all recordings, transcripts, and reports of witness testimony. Trump's next hearing is set for August 28th, when the judge is expected to set a trial date. Meantime, Trump continuing on the campaign trail this week, blasting President Biden during an appearance in New Hampshire. The rally was his first since pleading not guilty last week to 4 federal charges in that January 6 case. Trump said he's been holding back out of respect for the office of president, but in light of the most recent indictment, he's now letting loose.
They took the gloves off, and we can say whatever we want. And I'll tell you what, what he's done is a scandal the likes of which this country has never seen. I'm sorry, I won't be able to go to Iowa today. I won't be able to go to New Hampshire today because I'm sitting in a courtroom on bull because his attorney general charged me with something.
Trump questioned whether this would be the future of elections with sitting presidents indicting competitors. Of course, a grand jury handed the indictment. The White House says it has no role in the case. Developing now, U.S. Attorney David Weiss has been appointed as special counsel in the investigation into Hunter Biden. In a statement, the Justice Department said Weiss will be responsible for the, quote, ongoing investigation, as well as any matters that may arise from that investigation. This comes as prosecutors revealed in a court filing that a plea deal over tax and gun charges against Hunter had broken down and that the case would likely have to go to trial. Turning to the border, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey has declared a state of emergency for the state shelter system. Healey says it's providing services to about 20,000 people, 80% more than a year ago, in part due to the number of migrants being relocated to Massachusetts. While those are asylum seekers going through the proper channels provided by U.S. law, new reports indicate illegal border crossings are up after a lull as some criticize how the numbers are reported. Here's the National Desk, Kayla Gaskins.
A record-setting summer heat doing little to deter those determined to make it to the United States.
These guys are out here for 2 days, 2 nights.
In the Tucson, Arizona sector alone, illegal migrant crossings up 134% compared to last month, according to unpublished Border Patrol data obtained by CBS News.
This fiscal year, we're on track for over 3 million nationwide encounters.
The uptick coming after migration numbers slowed in June. The administration crediting that slowdown to their new asylum policies.
Our border enforcement plan works.
But former acting commissioner for U.S. Customs and Border Protection, Mark Morgan, equating the favorable figures to a sleight of hand.
It's a big shell game. They're not being honest with the American people.
A crisis mounting in New York as border states continue busing migrants to the sanctuary city.
More than 95,000 asylum seekers have arrived here since last spring.
Residents unhappy the city turned a Brooklyn rec center into a migrant shelter.
Eventually, this was going to come to a neighborhood near you.
Mayor Eric Adams also planning to house migrants in tents on the youth soccer fields of Randall's Island.
We need to control the border. We need to call a state of emergency, and we need to properly fund this national crisis.
The federal government sending $104 million in federal emergency funds to help New York. Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema saying this week she's livid the additional funds are not going to border states.
The fact that a yeoman's amount of this money went to New York City, in my opinion, is wrong. What we're experiencing here in Arizona is matched only by what folks are experiencing in southern Texas. The leader of the United States Senate is from New York. That is how a bunch of money went to New York.
Biden making a stop in Arizona Tuesday, where he's having a particularly hard time in the polls, despite winning the state in 2020. The president visiting the northern part of the state to talk about climate change rather than visiting the border.
In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins for the National Desk, America's News Now.
The Supreme Court temporarily revived regulations on firearms without serial numbers known as ghost guns. Justices voted 5-4 to freeze a lower court ruling banning regulations on them while the Biden administration appeals. That means officials can require manufacturers of ghost gun kits to obtain licenses, mark the products with serial numbers, and maintain records. Gun rights advocates claim the requirements are overbearing. Meantime, a federal judge blocked a new Colorado law that raised the age to buy a gun to 21. The preliminary injunction was granted Monday as a legal challenge from a gun rights group. makes its way through the courts. The law was signed by Democratic Governor Jared Polis in April, following a surge in violent crime and mass shootings. Right now, a nationwide drug shortage is impacting patients, according to a new survey from the University of Utah Drug Information Service. There were 309 active medication shortages in the second quarter of the year, the most in nearly a decade. About 1/3 of healthcare system pharmacists say they have been forced to ration, delay, or cancel treatments or procedures. And the writers' strike has now passed the 100-day mark, officially lasting longer than what we saw in 2007. And one of their key demands is regulation of artificial intelligence. Our Eugene Ramirez spoke with the fact-check team about how AI is affecting the entertainment industry.
Hollywood actors and writers are on strike after their unions were unable to reach an agreement with industry executives. The use of artificial intelligence, a major sticking point there. I'm with Connor from the Fact Check team. AI has changed lots of industries. What does it mean for show business?
Well, Eugene, the movie industry has been using AI actually for years to do things like generate animations and fix performances without having to reshoot the entire thing. Now, it's also been able to tweak images and make actors look younger, like it did with Harrison Ford in the most recent Indiana Jones movie, and even use dead actors for roles like they've done in the newer Star Wars movies.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible what they can do with the technology, but it's so sophisticated that actors fear AI can replace them. It can take their jobs.
Right, Eugene, and that's because AI can duplicate an actor's image with body scans, and people in the industry are worried that the studios will use these digital replicas instead of hiring background actors to save time and money. And the studios have said they have a proposal to protect performers, including getting consent before creating a digital replica, but the union said the proposal failed to address many vital concerns.
All right, Connor, thank you. And Janae is going to join me next. We'll be looking at how AI is impacting the music industry as well.
A neighborhood divided, how the debate over a maple tree is turning people against each other, and why neighbors say a recent city ordinance is to blame. And in New York State, a popular beach is shut down because of a shark attack, where it happened and why officials say it's so unusual. Scientists say they've improved in energy breakthrough twice now in under a year. Researchers at California-based Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory created a nuclear fusion reaction that produced more energy than was used to create it. This time they say the experiment produced even more power than the first time. Nuclear fusion is what powers the sun. The ability to harness that power could lead to commercial clean energy in the future. A busy weekend of storm cleanup is in store for the eastern U.S. after severe storms tore through the region earlier this week. The wide-ranging system left 2 people dead in Alabama and South Carolina and left a trail of damage from Tennessee to New York. In southeast Massachusetts, look here, at least 2 tornadoes were confirmed. You're looking at the destruction from one of those tornadoes. A tree uprooted, the winds uprooting several trees, which toppled over onto homes and dragged down power lines. Heavy rain from those storms left cars partially submerged. The National Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, starting in Washington, where part of an ongoing fight to save a tree was caught on camera.
This is private property, ma'am.
Yeah, so get off this private property right now.
Come on down. You're going to hurt somebody.
We don't need to be cutting down these trees.
The permit posted on the fence surrounding the lot where 3 new homes will be built authorizes the developer to cut down the tree, now called Doug, along with 2 others in the backyard.
It is rare to find a Douglas fir this vibrant and healthy in the city.
We are disappointed in the new city ordinance, tree ordinance. We're disappointed in the old city tree ordinance.
The city granted the permit for work on this lot under the old tree code. The new tree code is supposed to help preserve the city's tree canopy. Brian Stevens in the city's permit center tells me most tree loss is happening in areas zoned neighborhood residential and parks and natural areas, accounting for 78% of the total canopy loss between 2016 and 2021.
Sure, we need more housing, and we also need more trees. And we cannot afford to lose the trees that we have. And so we need to do both, and it's certainly possible to do both.
The new tree code does lower the threshold for removing trees, and it gives developers incentives to keep trees.
Now over to Rhode Island, seeing a dramatic increase in beach closures this season. According to the state health department, beaches have been shut down 205 days so far compared to 169 last year. This year's extreme weather has resulted in high bacteria levels. Rainwater washes bacteria into the water, and higher water temperatures provide the perfect environment for bacteria to thrive. Several municipalities have worked to reduce the bacteria issue by implementing water runoff and sewage programs. In Florida, with the start of the new school year approaching, many military veterans are preparing for their next career as teachers. The new Heroes in the Classroom bonus program offers a one-time sign-on bonus to retired first responders and vets who become full-time teachers. It's part of Florida's efforts to combat the teacher shortage. One veteran taking part in the program says he's looking forward to serving our country in a different capacity.
I know when I look back, some of my biggest influences were my teachers, especially in middle school years. Those are very formative. So just to be able to have an impact in their future and really, help mold who they become.
Well said. And Jesse Steele will be teaching history and civics to middle schoolers. A New York City beach is closed following a shark attack Monday. Officials say a swimmer was seriously injured at Rockaway Beach when a shark bit her leg. The 65-year-old woman was taken to a nearby hospital, and according to police, she is stable. Park officials say the incident marks the first confirmed shark bite on Rockaway Beach in recent memory. This week, President Biden designated a new national monument in Arizona. It conserves nearly 1 million acres of landscape surrounding Grand Canyon National Park. The land is home to thousands of cultural and sacred sites for tribal nations in the Southwest. It includes Red Butte, where the president signed the proclamation.
There's no national treasure, none that is grander than the Grand Canyon. Help right the wrongs of the past and conserve this land of ancestral footprints for all future generations.
And this is the 5th national monument he's created since taking office. The federal government also announced $44 million to strengthen climate resilience across the national park system. So beautiful. So to come here on the National Desk, the writer's strike hitting a critical milestone in California, where negotiations stand, how much the strike could cost the state's economy. Plus, the drug known for weight loss may carry another benefit, why your insurance could now start covering it. Developing now, more than 100 days in and no end in sight to the writers' strike. Both sides aren't budging after failing to reach an agreement earlier this month following negotiations. The union is seeking better pay, improved residual payments, and protections against the rising use of artificial intelligence. The last strike in 2007 lasted for 100 days. It led to 37,700 lost jobs and a $2.1 billion blow to the California economy, according to an economic think tank. Right now, Chrysler is recalling nearly 45,000 vehicles due to airbags, which may not be deploying properly. 2023 and 2022 Jeep Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer models are included. Chrysler dealers will fix the problem for free. The company says it will be notifying individual customers by mail. The pandemic spurred changes in the workplace, from quiet quitting to the Great Resignation. Now there is a new controversial trend gaining popularity. The National Desk's Angelo explains lazy girl jobs.
A lazy girl job pays a comfortable salary. It's low stress. You get the work done, you go home. You're not pouring your energy into working overtime or working on vacation. Lazy girl job is becoming an anthem for people revolting against hustle culture, exploding on TikTok. The hashtag racking up millions of views and growing. We talked to the 20-something-year-old who coined the term lazy girl job about the message behind it. What exactly is a lazy girl job?
So for me, it's like, how can you stay pretty neutral about your job, still do the work, still show up, still communicate these things to your boss and things like that, but stay neutral, be able to have work-life balance and be able to actually know who you are as a person and dive into like whatever you see fit with that extra time.
Some women love it, posting video of their so-called lazy girl jobs on TikTok. But critics say there's a downside. A lazy girl job runs the risk of being cut first during layoffs, and it could slow down a woman's career path. Here's what Gabrielle had to say.
We're really at this crisis with late stage capitalism where there's a lot of unnecessary work. And so really what I'm tackling is that unnecessary work spot. So if certain people are going to criticize what I'm saying as, oh, these jobs that she's saying aren't going anywhere, it's kind of furthering proving my point.
The World Economic Forum says by 2025, Gen Z will account for nearly 1/3 of the workforce, and they are not getting into formation. A recent study sampling 35,000 workers across 34 markets found that almost 50% of Gen Zers would prefer to not have a job than have a job that they did not like or made them unhappy. And what does Gen Z want? Survey after survey says they want work-life balance. That's key for that generation, which is the backbone of this trend, lazy girl job. In Washington, D.C., I'm Angela Brown.
Interesting. Angela, thanks. New details on the weight loss drug Wegovy. Drug maker Novo Nordisk says it can benefit your heart, too. The company says Wegovy reduces the risk of dying from a heart attack or stroke by 20%. The drug maker now wants that added to the prescription label, which could pressure insurers to cover the drug. The results come from a company-funded study. They've yet to be published in a peer-reviewed journal. After a decades-long restriction on who can give blood, the American Red Cross has updated its guidelines to allow more gay and bisexual men to donate. The organization's previous policies banned most gay men from donating blood regardless of their health. That was in line with rules set by the FDA almost 40 years ago during the height of the AIDS pandemic. Now, these restrictions will apply to all donors, regardless of sexual orientation, people taking HIV prevention medications, and donors who report having a new sexual partner in the past 3 months. The FDA said the new policy reflects the latest scientific evidence and will allow for a more robust blood supply. Still ahead, the stories making headlines next week. What we're expecting to see out of Georgia as the district attorney prepares to present her election interference case to a grand jury. Developing now, the use of artificial intelligence in political ads. The Federal Elections Commission has voted to advance a petition asking for regulation. The vote comes after advocacy group Public Citizen asked the agency to clarify that the law against fraudulent misrepresentation also applies to campaign ads that use AI. Some presidential campaigns in the 2024 race have already used AI to persuade voters. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' campaign, for example, used AI to generate images of former President Donald Trump hugging infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci. The FEC will not make a decision until after the 60-day public comment window, which is likely to begin this week. Looking ahead to stories making headlines this week. Next week, we could see the fourth indictment of former President Donald Trump in the coming days. The district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, plans to present her election interference case to a grand jury sometime next week. And in addition to the former president, as many as 20 others could face charges. House Republicans will continue to dig into Hunter Biden's finances. Threats of a presidential subpoena are on the radar. And on Tuesday, the Commerce Department will release its monthly retail sales report, giving us new insight into spending habits from July. It's coming out on the heels of a report showing U.S. credit debt topped $1 trillion for the first time ever. Coming up here on the National Desk, this week's inflation report, why there is good news behind the rise. You're watching the National Desk, America's News Now. You can catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back.
The National Desk, America's News Now.
Inflation rises for the first time in 10 months. We're digging deep to see if it's a bad thing. And a huge vote in Ohio, why it could impact the rest of the country, and is a deal a deal? Families concerned that Boeing is protected from prosecution following 2 airline tragedies. From the nation's capital, this is the National Desk, America's News Now. We're glad you're with us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we are checking in on your money. Inflation is down dramatically in the past year, from near double digits to 3%. But this week, we saw the first increase in more than a year. The increase to 3.2% was less than the predicted 3.3%. Fed Chair Jerome Powell explained last month why prices dropped over the year, but says getting inflation the rest of the way down to the 2% target will be on the Fed. We're getting a fresh look at the state of consumer debt in the U.S. In June, the total amount of debt held by Americans jumped more than 4% from the year before, and rising interest rates are making it tougher to pay off. The National Desk Atra Al-Nishar has a closer look from Washington.
Debt for Americans is piling up. Between May and June, consumers used nearly $18 billion in credit. And a new study from Bankrate shows when it comes to credit card debt, paying it off can take a while.
We found that 60% of people with credit card debt have had it for at least a year. And that's up from 50% 2 years ago. And I think this really speaks to the cumulative toll of inflation and also the cumulative toll of the higher interest rates.
The study finds the biggest causes of debt are emergency expenses like medical bills and car repairs. And debt tends to be harder to shake for higher earners.
If you have a six-figure income, you may be less likely to have credit card debt, but if you do have it, there's about a 7 in 10 chance that you've had it for at least a year.
Meanwhile, auto loan delinquencies are occurring at a higher rate than they were during the Great Recession, according to TransUnion and S&P Global Mobility. And some borrowers could be stretched even further when federal student loan payments restart October 1st. The Biden administration's upcoming repayment terms mean the Department of Education won't report delinquent payments that occur before September 30th of 2024. What will show up sooner is whether resumed payments on a cumulative $1.7 trillion in student loans erode consumer spending. The Federal Reserve already aiming for a slowdown in demand through higher interest rates.
I expect that additional increases will likely be needed to lower inflation to the FOMC's goal.
Lower prices could mean people feel less of a need to reach for their credit card instead of paying cash, but will bring on more expensive debt when they do. In Washington, I'm Atra Al-Nishar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Democrats renewing the call for a code of ethics for U.S. Supreme Court justices. It comes following the release of a report saying Justice Clarence Thomas accepted many more vacations and gifts from billionaires than previously revealed. According to ProPublica, 4 moguls collectively treated Thomas to 38 destination vacations, 26 private jet flights, plus an additional 8 by helicopter, a dozen VIP passes to professional and college sporting events, 2 stays at luxury resorts, and a standing invitation to an exclusive golf club. Justice Thomas has previously said he didn't feel the need to disclose some gifts. Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Dick Durbin believes these are not merely ethical lapses. The latest revelation comes as some point out both conservative and liberal-leaning justices appear to have benefited from their positions, outraging both sides of the aisle. Voters in Ohio rejecting a ballot measure that would make it harder to amend the state constitution. The decision carries major implications for the state's November vote on an amendment that would enshrine the right to an abortion. Now it will only take a simple majority to approve the change, but the proposal called Issue 1 would have raised that to 60%. People on both sides of the issue sounding off after the results were announced.
This was about protecting a 100-year precedent that had been set in Ohio, a simple majority rule.
This was a battle worth having. We needed to have a decision with the state of Ohio, all 88 counties. Look, do we want to protect our Constitution from outside special interests, whether they be liberal or conservative special interests, or do we want our Constitution to be for sale?
And following the vote, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine is now asking for a compromise on abortion policy in the state. New details now about the 6-year-old Virginia boy who shot his teacher in January. An unsealed search warrant shows he later bragged about the shooting to a school employee. Police say he told the employee, quote, "I shot that expletive dead, and I did it. I got my mom's gun last night." First grade teacher Abigail Zwerner survived after she was shot in the hand and the chest. The boy's mother is expected to plead guilty to child neglect on Tuesday. Developing now, Portland, Oregon City Commissioner is warning it could take years for 911 answering times to fall back down to pre-pandemic levels. The National Desk, Ryan Gazaway, explains why the call centers are struggling, leaving callers on hold.
911.
911.
911. 911.
911. What is the address of the emergency?
The wait time between dialing 911 and hearing a voice on the other end of the line.
And what's your name? What is the address of your emergency?
I need a bit more information from you.
Started spiking in Portland during the summer of 2020. It got worse over the next 2 years. The average wait time reached 64 seconds in the first 6 months of 2022.
I'm sending paramedics to help you now.
Data from the 911 center shows the average wait time is down to 46 seconds through the first 6 months of this year. A long way from perfect, but progress, according to Commissioner Renee Gonzalez. Gonzalez is the commissioner in charge of the 911 center.
How confident are you that the wait time has peaked and will continue to go down?
I think as long as we don't see material further increases in overall volume, I'm optimistic we're going to continue to see reduced wait times.
Optimistic, but not sugarcoating it. Just 4 years ago, it took call takers 9 seconds on average to answer 911 calls in the first 6 months of 2019. Once again, the average time was 46 seconds on average through June this year.
Is it even realistic to think Portland could get back to that?
I don't think we're going to see that in the short term. I think that we're a couple years away from that being a plausible scenario.
Here's why. Call volume is up nearly 35% through the first 6 months of this year compared to the same period in 2019. Staffing is not. The 911 center is funded for 136 positions. 17 positions were vacant at the end of May.
All right, you're doing a really great job. Okay, they're getting closer. All right, I'm going to stay on the line with you, okay?
Call takers tell us they frequently go from call
Any weapons seen?
to call
Is there any more Narcan available?
to call
Okay, tell me exactly what is burning.
and hear frustration from almost every caller.
You mentioned that there was a knife earlier. Where is the knife?
The agency has more than 50 people in training.
The expectation for our director is he has got to continue to build that pipeline to get more people on the floor.
Okay, slapping him isn't going to help him. I want you to realize that. That's okay. You just stay online with me, all right?
The director's report shows the agency needs anywhere from 60 to 90 additional call takers to answer every 911 call within 15 seconds, depending on the month. That level of expansion is not possible. However, Gonzalez says it's time to discuss adding even more people in the 911 center if call volume continues at this level.
An interesting story there. That was Wright Gasaway reporting. The commissioner says nearly 20 trainees will start answering calls on their own as soon as this fall. The Department of Justice may have broken the law when it gave Boeing an immunity deal, protecting the company and its executives from criminal prosecution for 2 737 MAX plane crashes. It's why families are asking a federal appeals court to unwind the agreement and give them a chance at the justice they say their loved ones deserve. Spotlight on America's Lisa Fletcher is following the case.
Less than 6 months apart, 2 Boeing 737 MAX planes crashed, killing everyone on board. As part of an immunity deal with the Department of Justice, Boeing admitted to misleading federal regulators about the safety of its planes. In exchange, the company and its executives would be protected from criminal prosecution. Under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, the law requires victims be consulted in the immunity agreement process. But in this case, we're left out, which is why families are asking a federal court to invalidate the deal.
So it's very important that this court turn back and say, okay, you broke the law, the Department of Justice, you didn't consult with victims. Now that the agreement is not valid. We have to make a new plan, a new prosecution.
Nadia Milleron's daughter, Samia, died in the second crash on March 10, 2019. She and other victims say Boeing should not be protected from prosecution.
Is there evidence that proves that Boeing's executives acted in a criminal manner?
Well, in this case, Boeing, the company, has admitted that it committed a crime, conspiracy, and the district judge has found that this was the deadliest corporate crime in U.S. history. 346 people died, but nobody was ever held criminally accountable, and that's what this case is all about. Boeing, the company, and its then leadership should be criminally prosecuted for the deadly crimes that they committed.
Paul Cassell is a former federal judge and law professor who made the argument before the appeals court.
We're hoping that the Court of Appeals will send this case back to the district court and strike out of this agreement the immunity provisions.
If the DOJ has already demonstrated its willingness to essentially protect Boeing and its leadership, why should families have any hope that that would change?
Well, this deal was done secretly and hastily at the close of the previous administration. So we're hoping that if the courts order the Justice Department to take a fresh look at the case and a fair-minded assessment of the evidence, that the result will be very different.
Earlier this summer, a Texas district court determined the Department of Justice violated the Crime Victims' Rights Act, but concluded it was powerless to take action. If the appeals court finds in favor of the victims, it will send the case back to Texas with guidance on how to proceed. Victims' families tell me that the hearing went as well as it possibly could have, and they say that based on the judge's line of questioning, it seemed that they may have some pretty innovative solutions. That said, a verdict from the three-judge panel is not expected for months. For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Lisa, thank you. Coming up next here on the National Desk, the key role a motel owner played in a Florida sex trafficking case. The National Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. Tonight we start in Florida, where quick thinking by a motel owner in Lake Worth Beach saved 2 girls from sex trafficking.
Owner Richard Barone has been working at Lago Motor Inn along South Dixie Highway in Lake Worth Beach for the past 12 years. His quick thinking led deputies to arrest these 2 people, Maria Solero and Ricardo Flores, on several counts of human trafficking. It was around 6 a.m. Sunday when he checked Flores into this room 107. He was alone at the time. About 30 minutes later, he knocked on the door after learning there was some sort of argument happening between Flores and Solero.
He opened the door, and then I see 2 young women, girls, sitting in the middle of the bed. She said to me that he has to pay. He didn't pay. He has to pay.
The owner spotted a condom next to Flores and 2 girls sitting on the bed with him, all while the 2 suspects were still arguing about a suspicious transaction gone wrong.
The girls were sitting right over here, on the bench, quiet, eyes like this, looks scary.
The people is not pay.
Shocked by what he saw, he called the police and captured this moment on his cell phone, showing Solero behind the wheel with the girls trying to drive away. It didn't take long for authorities to get there and gather enough evidence that they say eventually revealed Solero coordinated a date between 2 girls and Flores, while Flores paid the girls for sex.
Now to Virginia, where an attempted murder suspect is in custody after a shootout at a shopping center in Alexandria. U.S. Marshals were trying to arrest Stuart Ray for a Maryland shooting when he attempted to flee the scene and gunfire broke out. Ray suffered life-threatening injuries. Officers say he had a gun, but they could not yet say who fired first. No one else was injured, and the investigation continues. In Oregon, a Portland neighborhood is being terrorized by what residents are calling a vicious raccoon. Video caught on Jordan Barbeau's doorbell camera shows a woman and her dog being attacked by a raccoon while on a late-night walk. Barbeau believes that's the same raccoon that attacked her husband and dogs 3 weeks ago. The Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife says the raccoon is most likely trying to protect its young from predators, though Barbeau says the attacks are unprovoked.
She's not reacting to being cornered. It's a pretty serious overreaction, and it's really alarming.
Barbeau is now taking matters into her own hands. She hired a private wildlife control operator to install a trap. She's also posted warning signs about the wild animal. Well, a lot of the Hollywood strike is focused on AI's impact on the visual platforms, but what about music? The Fact Check team unfolds that part of the story.
Concerns are mounting over the use of AI in the entertainment industry. It's one of the main points in the Hollywood writers and actors strikes. I'm with Janae from the Fact Check team. The music industry also concerned about this fast-growing technology. What are the issues there?
Well, Eugene, just like actors, musicians are concerned about their voices and likeness being copied. A few months ago, a lot of people were talking about what seemed to be a new song from rap superstar Drake, but it was an AI copycat of Drake's voice. Now, his music label is pushing Congress to pass new AI laws, including a measure requiring AI music or artwork to be labeled as such.
But don't current laws already protect musicians?
Well, the Music Modernization Act was made law in 2018, and it helps to ensure musicians are fairly compensated by publishers. Now, this was passed in response to piracy issues, which has cost artists billions of dollars. But just 5 years later, congressional leaders say that law is not enough to protect artists' music against AI and its growing capacity to copy. And with the technology moving so quickly, there's also the challenge of the next law being ineffective before it's even enacted.
Yeah, you got to keep up with all the changes. Janae, thanks. And for more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to Janae's sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com.
Still to come here, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from the latest inflation numbers to the $2 billion given to groups under Taliban control.
And welcome back. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day to report on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. The Bureau's correspondents are here with their insights on the stories they've been covering. National correspondent Atra El-Nashar, inflation ticking up a bit last month, but you took a look at how much more Americans are paying for necessities since price surges started 2 years ago. What did you discover?
Right. So declining inflation and declining prices are two separate things, unfortunately, for American households. We're seeing the former, but not the latter. So I talked to ZipRecruiter's chief economist, Julia Pollack, about this, and she explains that were it not for the pandemic inflation surge, prices would be about 7% higher now than they were before the pandemic. But in reality, they're more than 17% higher. So this is math that's really tough to square for households, but arguably the alternative could be worse. We're talking about deflation, which is an overall decline in prices, and it's typically associated with a dramatic slowdown in the economy or a recession. It's something we're starting to see emerge in China, and it could be, a much tougher thing to reverse and take longer to reverse than inflation.
And these stubbornly high prices playing into how Americans are feeling about the economy and how they feel about President Biden's handling of it. Something to watch as we get into the election next year. Meanwhile, national correspondent Christine Frizzau, a new Inspector General's report revealing that the U.S. has sent billions to groups under the Taliban. As we mark 2 years since the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, tell us what you learned.
Yeah, I think, Steve, a lot of people would be really surprised to learn that we are still sending so much money there. In fact, since we left almost 2 years ago, we have sent $8 billion to Afghanistan. Now, on one hand, look, we've been able to stave off famine across the country, but the United Nations just put out this estimate that more than 30 million Afghans are in desperate need of food aid, and they're not getting it. So where is that money going? Well, the Inspector General the Inspector General for Afghan reconstruction recently spoke to lawmakers and said something that was just absolutely stunning. He said, as I sit here today, I cannot assure this committee or the American taxpayer that we are not currently funding the Taliban. As we know, the Taliban is in charge of everything there. So some of those millions of dollars that we're sending, they're going to pay the Taliban and funding terrorists. So there's a lot of concern here on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers starting to call for more transparency to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, and as we hit 2 years since the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, I'm sure we'll be hearing more about this moving forward. Meantime, Kayla Gaskins, national correspondent, women's sports and who should be allowed to participate has become a growing political debate. You spoke to a former college athlete about what she's doing about this issue. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Steve, today I talked to Riley Gaines. She's the former NCAA swimmer who tied with Leah Thomas. That's the trans woman that competed at the NCAA swimming and diving national championships last year. So Thomas and Gaines tied for 5th. At the national championships. And Gaines, when she was up there on the podium, sharing the podium with Leah Thomas, she said it just all started sinking in. She felt betrayed by the NCAA. It really did not sit right with her. And this is when she really started her advocacy and her mission to fight for women in women's sports. And she says this is what Title IX is all about. And they should not have biological males competing against biological females. They had to share a locker room with Thomas, which she found very uncomfortable. So what Gaines is doing now is she's teaming up with the Leadership Institute. That's a conservative nonprofit based in Arlington, Virginia. And they will offer mentoring, guidance, and resources to other women, female athletes, or just female college students in general to guide them on this issue and how to approach these problems if they would like to tackle this at their own university. Now, Gaines is also advocating for legislation, just helped pass a bill in Texas where they made a statewide ban where biological men cannot compete in sports against biological women. 15 other states have that similar ban, but the Biden administration says that they will not support that on the federal level.
National correspondents Kayla Gaskins, Christine Frizzau, Atra El-Nashar, top-notch stuff as always. Thank you for your hard work. Back to you.
Thank you all. Coming up next here on the National Desk, this dog-loving thief is on the run. The city officials say he's prowling and the help you can provide. The FDA recently announced it has signed off on the first pill for postpartum depression. The condition affects about 400,000 women a year. Zuranolone is given daily for 2 weeks. In clinical trials, the FDA noted in patients significantly more improvement in their symptoms compared to those in the placebo groups. Medical experts point out the positive is the more immediate response, but they told me there are limitations.
Zuranolone is limited only to patients who are having more severe symptoms. But the other problem is we only tested it in 14 patients for nursing. So we don't really have great data to say that it's safe for nursing mothers.
And side effects reported from the trial included drowsiness, dizziness, and fatigue. Despite efforts, the FDA did not approve the pill for the treatment of adults with major depressive disorder. New York reporting a spike in COVID cases. The state's health department says there was a 55% increase last week compared to the previous week. It breaks down to an average of 824 cases per day statewide. Hospitalizations also increased 22%, which translates to more than 100 new admissions every day. That as a new variant of the virus becomes dominant. Look here, the CDC says EG.5, an offshoot of the Omicron variant, makes up around 17% of all COVID cases. However, medical experts say it does not seem to cause more severe illness than previous variants. New tonight, the San Diego Police Department is asking for the public's help in identifying a dog-loving burglary suspect.
You're the coolest dog I've ever known. I love you too. You're a sweetheart.
All right, officials say this home surveillance video captured in mid-July shows the suspect leaving the home with a bike valued at $1,300. But as you can see there, not before stopping mid-heist to shower the household dog with attention. At one point, the suspect even told the dog, quote, "Your dad should not leave your garage open." Police are asking anyone with information to contact them. So not the best guard dog, but definitely very cute. Love that story. All right, that's going to do it for us on the weekend edition of the National Desk America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Check your local listings, and you can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Dee Gatton, and from all of us at the National Desk, have a great week.